All right, everybody, welcome to JCLive, your weekly source for JCL news and fun. I'm your host, Mr. Kurt Ristroff, Publications Chair for the National Junior Classical League, an organization of middle and high school students in classical courses. And I remembered the intro this time. If you watched last week's episode, I totally messed up the intro because I had been out for a week and it all fell out of my head, but I got it. There we go. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the show. Happy Thanksgiving week to everyone. Hopefully, my hope is that everybody's out of school this week, and so we're just going to have 10 times the viewership that we normally do. We'll see about that. So please welcome to our special guest, Miss Erin Percivault. Is a good friend of mine. She's joining us to talk about houseplants and botanical Latin and all kinds of cool things. Last week, people saw some of the plants that I had moved into my room for my background because I had a conference last week and I wanted to have a prettier background than the JCL banner. You know, I can't put the JCL banner up for my my work conference, so I needed something other than the blank wall. And everybody said, "Oh, look, Mr. Ristroff's got plants. Let's talk about plants. If we get to 700 subscribers, let's talk about plants." And we got to 700 subscribers, so here we are to talk about plants. Also, because I absolutely messed up the scheduling for this show, we had a guest who we talked last week. We said Miss Natalie Roy from Louisiana is going to come on and talk about Roman stem. I had written down that she was coming on this week. She had written down, and our email exchange had said she was coming on next week. So it was all, she'll be coming on in a couple of weeks. It'll all be good. So in the meantime, we've got Miss Percivault here. Erin, very nice to have you on the show. Erin, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Nice way to mix up a Monday evening. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very happy to have you on the show. People are already saying it's plant time in all caps in the chat, so that's good. We have, oh no, Riona has school on Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. You don't get the whole week off? That's a shame. In college, you don't get the whole week off either. But I always liked getting all of Thanksgiving week off. That's when everybody, or at least that's when the seniors do their college applications, right? You know, you fill out the Common App. You've got all your ACT and SAT scores, like your most recent scores. Hopefully they're the best ones. And you fill out your Common App and you turn in your college applications. And then you have Christmas break with no college applications. At least that's how high school was when I was in high school. But that was longer ago than I care to admit. Okay, we're going to start the show off with some announcements, and then we'll get back with Erin, and she will tell us all about plants. So, Erin, we'll talk about you and your background and everything in just a second. Hang on. So, a couple of announcements to go through real quick at the beginning here. First of all, make sure you join JCL this year. A lot of you, I think, are already JCL members. You already know about this. What you might not know is that your teacher does have to register your chapter at some point during the year. And, excuse me, if they register the chapter before December 1st, there is no club fee. So after December 1st, the cost goes up. Nobody wants that. And if you register now, if you register soon, then you will be entered to win some of the wonderful JCL prizes shown here on the screen. We got a bumper sticker, we got a fridge magnet, a water bottle is probably like the grand prize, and some pens, things like that. So be sure to register your club, or remind your teacher to register your club, and you could be entered to win some of these fantastic prizes. Okay, it's still November. We're on the 23rd, so we're in November. The November Club of the Month theme applies. Club of the Month, as you all may know, is a monthly competition run by, or administered by, our second Vice President, Lindy Raining, who is in the chat right now. So, Lindy, if you want to, chime in here and let people know to, or hype people up about submitting to Club of the Month. The theme for this month, which you don't have to follow, but it's neat if you do, is New Club November. So if you started a club this year or last year, or if you're an old club and you're helping out, or an established club, and you're helping out a new club, then that can count too. So your interpretation of New Club November is there. All right. Live Curtamen is coming soon, very soon, less than 2 weeks soon, or exactly 2 weeks? Today's Monday, 2 weeks from Thursday, right? No, 1 week from Thursday. So a week and a half from now It's 3 days from now until Thursday, and then a week after that, Curtamen, live Curtamen on the channel on Thursday. First Thursday of every month, we'll have Curtamen content. Everybody wants Curtamen content. We've got it. Tell your friends. Even your friends who are like, I don't want to tune into that talk show on Mondays because all I care about is Curtamen. We will have Curtamen content on this YouTube channel. So tell your friends. So there. Tell your friends that there is something on the YouTube channel for everyone. Lincoln Ream, do I get to play in the Curtamen? You should email Miss Jenny Luongo at curtamen@njcl.org to ask. I'm sure there's a place for you. Street Curtamen. I don't know what that is. Okay, other things. We've recently announced the Video of the Month contest, which is an initiative by NJCL historian Vivian Wu. There was, all these details are available on our Instagram account. This is basically... The reductionist version of this is that this is you can submit your favorite JCL TikToks every month and you can win prizes for it. But it doesn't have to be, of course. It is some kind of video. It's akin to the Photo of the Month contest. It's the Video of the Month contest. Showcasing a JCL activity. You can read more about the details. Here's how to submit frequently asked questions. I'm not going to read this to you. I know you know how to read. And there's a link in the description below on how to do all of that. So Video of the Month contest, it's due, I believe, at the end of every month. Yep, due before the end of the month. And the end of the month is coming up. So Photo of the Month and Video of the Month are coming up too. Other things. Okay, general stream rules. Don't spam the chat. We'd never have a problem with that because y'all are awesome. Feedback forms. The feedback form is in the description. Also, if you have an announcement for us to make, there's a form for that in the description that no one has ever filled out. So we have made some announcements for other people, but it's not because they submitted the feedback form. It's because they emailed me. So you can email me your announcements too. That works just fine. Our subscriber goals, we said 700 subscribers, we'll talk about plants. Here we are talking about plants. If we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll do JCL merchandise raffling, which will be a lot of fun. If we get to 2,000 subscribers, which is a stretch, we'll do a lip sync or karaoke stream with the officers. And then over here on the right-hand side, I have upcoming shows. As y'all know, this kind of fluctuates, and these plans are not solid always, because last week I said we'd be on talking about Roman stem, and here we are talking about plants. So, but that's all good. So the projected next 3 shows are going to be a spotlight with Flint Hill School from Virginia, and we're playing a game, Scribble.io. I don't know what that is, but they're going to run it. That'll be interactive, fun with the chat next week. Let's see. Yes, Lincoln, you have spammed and been timed out before, so I shouldn't say we never have a problem with it. And then the week after, we'll have another panel discussion. Our first panel discussion from JCL to Science was a big hit, so we'll have one from JCL to Law. And then Magister Natalie Roy is going to come back on December 14th and talk about Roman stem. But today we're talking about plants. Today's the plants show. So again, please welcome to the show Miss Erin Percival. Erin is coming to us from she works at a landscape architecture firm, a very highly regarded landscape architecture firm. She's a young professional, someone that I admire and respect very much. Was not in JCL, has never taken Latin. Is that right, Erin?
No, I haven't, which has led to, I have learned botanical Latin now, and so that's led to some interesting conversations between the two of us that I'm sure y'all will hear a little bit more about.
Yeah, so Erin brings a really unique perspective to this, because most of the guests that we have on the show are people who know about JCL and people who took Latin or Greek in high school. And Erin is someone who uses Latin in her work. She uses these Latin terms for plants and botanical Latin and things like that, but hasn't had a formal Latin education. So the first time she said a plant name, what was the first plant that you said? It was probably an oak or something, right? A word that I would think would be pronounced acer.
Oh, the maple, the red maple.
Yeah. So
rubrum is what I said. I was told that was wrong now. Very wrong.
Well, it wasn't the pronunciation that I was prepared for, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I've got to arrange some windows on my screen, so why don't you take it away, Erin?
So, as Kurt said, I use botanical Latin in my work. Even though you see a bunch of houseplants around me, houseplants are my hobby. My day job, I work for a landscape architecture firm and I do a lot of design work for outdoor spaces. So, a lot of the work that I do can be with plants, specifying different kinds of plants, working with different ecologies. I do a lot of work in the Northeast, uh, and that includes both urban and rural work. So I could be out doing work planning pathways to go through a forest, or I could be designing a green roof or working in an urban park setting. So it's cool to have a lot of different kinds of work to do outside, to be able to use art and science together. And plants are a really wonderful and big part of that. But the house plants are a hobby. So I am not an expert or a professional necessarily on these guys, but I do love to have them around.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll talk more about those because I'm going to ask you to tell us about them. I know very little about plants, so you are definitely the expert on this stream. So when you were studying landscape architecture, how did botanical Latin come up, and how did you learn it? How did your professors approach it, and how do you use it in your day to day?
Sure. So really, as soon as we start learning about plants, we are learning the Latin names for them. And the reason for that, botanical Latin comes from Carl Linnaeus, who lots of times you might read about or hear about in science class or history class. And today it's regulated by the International Code of Botanic Nomenclature. And so what Linnaeus did was he created this system where he and a lot of other botanists were going out in different parts of the world and discovering plants that hadn't been known to them before. And increasingly so, they were looking and they were very interested in being able to communicate French scientists to English scientists to Italian scientists to Germans, about what it was they were finding, what different connections they were discovering between different plants. And so, sort of in this movement of excitement around plants and botanical discoveries, there was this idea of classifying and having a master system for classifying. And there were a lot of different sort of strategies for doing that, but the one that really took off and the one that we still use today, not just for plants, but also for animals, is the binomial nomenclature system. And y'all probably, with all your Latin, already know that the binomial means two names and nomenclature means to assign the names. So it's it's less, I guess, ancient classical Latin than it was. It was at a time that people were discovering ancient Latin again, through the medieval period. And so a lot of botanical Latin takes from both sort of more of a medieval Latin and then combines that with Greek, and now increasingly so more and more English as well. So you have this sort of mishmash together, which leads to some of those differences in pronunciation, where really today around the world, even though the spelling is typically the same, or should be the same throughout, you'll hear people from different parts of the world pronounce it differently. And it's generally accepted that you, like a native speaker of English will read it the way that an English speaker will read it. Someone who is Italian will read it the way that an Italian would read it. And so the sounds are more based on whatever language it is that you personally speak.
Gotcha. So binomial nomenclature, that's genus and species, is that right?
It's genus and species. So as they were busy classifying everything, You start with like the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, and you go all the way down through all these different categories and ways of breaking plants, all these species up until you get to genus and species.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you call a plant by these Latin names, the first word is the genus, which is the very sort of tight-knit nuclear family of that particular species. And then the species is the individual's name. And so every different kind of sort of plant there is out there has that genus name and then the species name, which together are unique to that, which is the basic idea. Then it gets a little bit more complicated with newer developments and a lot of different international debates about how to break things out from there.
Okay, yeah, and that's one thing that we were talking about before the show, breaking things out from there. So I didn't realize until a couple of years ago that plants have cultivars. There can be multiple cultivars of a single plant. And can you describe what that is for us? What does that mean?
Sure. Well, it might help to start by talking about varieties.
Okay.
So when you have a particular species of plant, that species can have varieties, it can have subspecies, it can have hybrids, and it can have cultivars. So a variety is typically considered something that happens naturally. Subspecies also are typically natural. A subspecies is more when a plant is geographically isolated. So say there was a plant growing on an island and the island broke in two,
Mm-hmm.
and then over time those two groups developed separately and couldn't mix. Those two, as long as they don't diverge too far and too different, because eventually those two might become two entirely different species. But until they do that, they're considered subspecies of a particular plant.
Okay. And so when they're subspecies, do they have, like when you go to name them with the Latin, do they have genus, species, and then a third word that is their subspecies?
Yes, it is a little bit of an older type of way of classifying things now. A lot of sort of the movement has been away from classifying things as subspecies, so this will be a little bit more unusual to see this. But it will typically say the genus, the species, and then say something, say there's an abbreviation for subspecies, and then whatever the subspecies deviation is.
Okay. And so, like, if a plant were to defeat Hannibal, would it be able to add Africanus to the end of its name as like a title? That's a Punic War joke that I think people in the chat will get. Okay, so that was subspecies, and then you said varieties and subspecies and all these other things. What were the other ones?
A variety is a different, it's similar to a subspecies. It may have slightly different characteristics, but it typically occurs naturally. One example, and I kind of challenge, I'm not sure I think that this happened naturally, but an example of this is cauliflower and broccoli.
Mm.
So broccoli and cauliflower are actually the same species, but they're just different varieties. And so that can tell you just how different a plant that's the exact same species can be, right? And so officially, those are considered varieties of the same species, but typically we say that that's something that happens naturally, and just because cauliflower and broccoli are foods, I don't know personally if that's, like how far down the line, like did someone just pull a broccoli and pull a cauliflower out of the ground and say, hey, these are the same thing? Or were they bred over time to create these different characteristics? And so that leads me to a cultivar.
Okay.
So our last sort of category of ways to differentiate plants is a cultivar. And what that is a cultivated variety, right? That's what it's short for.
Okay.
And so that's the idea, that there was intentionality in breeding this plant to become something slightly different from the original species. So
I never knew that cultivar was short for cultivated variety. I like it so much that I'm typing it in the chat. Okay. And so do cultivars also have a third Latin name on them?
It's actually, that's where things can be different.
Okay.
Cultivar names are typically not Latin. So
Blasphemy.
well, not all botanical Latin is Latin either. We got a lot of Greek in there.
That's okay. We're okay with that.
That Pathos mustard. So let's see. Example of a cultivar, actually, we can actually move into the physical examples now.
Oh, show and tell. Great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have one to show too.
So this is a philodendron. That is the genus name. I believe there are about 500 different types of philodendron. So within the genus, there are about 500 species of philodendron.
Okay.
And this one is actually pretty new. It's maybe only a handful of years old, at least in the trade. And what you'll see often in nursery trade is that rather than have genus, species, cultivar name, they'll just have a genus name and then the cultivar name in quotation marks.
Okay.
Or single quotations.
So what was the cultivar name on this guy, did you say?
So this guy is Philodendron Birkin.
Okay.
And guess y'all, with the classical training, know that the philo in philodendron, or philo, is it philo or philo?
Ask somebody who's had Greek.
Okay.
Philo, I think.
Okay. So, there's another example right there where I'm mispronouncing. But you'll typically hear it called a philodendron. And so the philo means love, and dendron refers to the trees. And often philodendron like to climb up trees. So that's why it's called what it is. And there's a lot of hints and clues throughout all of these Latin and Greek names as to the qualities of plants. Some of them tell you where they're from. Some of them are named after people in history. So someone who might have discovered a plant might name it in honor of someone. So like they used to name a lot of them after European monarchs because an explorer would get funded to go and collect plants, would bring them back and say, look, I named this for you. So it was a way of currying favor for a certain point of time.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat that I want to get to before we get too far away. Isabel Sullivan asks, do you ever get confused about these names? Do you ever get them mixed up?
Oh, totally. Probably the trickiest can be, especially for someone who didn't have training in the classics, is keeping the Japonicum, Japonicus, Japonica straight when you're first trying to memorize all these names.
Mm-hmm.
And that can definitely be pretty tricky. As for misidentifying plants, it happens a lot. And especially if you've never seen something before, the more and more exposure I get to certain kinds of plants, the easier it is to tell them by their different forms, by their different leaf shapes and habits. And a lot of times, like some plants change over time too. So if you've learned what the mature plant looks like, it might be kind of hard to tell what the juvenile or baby plant looks like. Sassafras is actually a good example of that, where the leaves change shape over time.
Okay.
So, it's just one of those things you learn from other people, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of good teachers who have tried to, help us remember little details and differences in things.
Gotcha. Dakota Morosi says, I love the music so much. Dakota, what I did was, I'll put the music in the chat in just a second. Before all these streams, I always go like, okay, what's the topic of the stream? Can I find some like chill music of that? So I typed in chill plant music into YouTube, and I found this video called Soothing Music for Plant Growth, Happiness, and Overall Health. I'll put the link in the chat. And that's a question for you, Aaron. I've heard that talking to plants is good for them, or I guess in this case, playing music for them by the Relax and Chill YouTube channel. Is that actually good for plants?
It probably doesn't hurt.
Oh.
What I do think it probably helps with is having some mindful time to be looking at your plant and paying attention to it. And so people who like to come up to their plant and talk to it, you're not only talking about it, but you're looking at it, right? You're focusing and paying sort of mindful attention to it and getting to learn what it looks like after it's had a drink of water, when it's thirsty. Is there a bug problem? So probably folks who do talk to their plants maybe have a little bit more sort of time or focus that they're devoting to keeping an eye on them.
Gotcha. So playing music for it and then walking away isn't quite the same. Another question from Lillian Telfers asks, what is your favorite plant? And I don't know if she means in general or of the ones around you right now. Both of those are hard questions, I know, for you. So you don't have to answer. She also asked a maybe simpler question. What is your favorite type of grass? What is your least favorite grass? I'll answer for me. My favorite type of grass is sugarcane. Because I grew up with a lot of sugarcane, so I know a decent bit about sugarcane, which is a kind of grass. But now all of these three questions: favorite plant, favorite kind of grass, and least favorite kind of grass for you, Aaron.
All right. Well, it is hard to pick absolute favorites. I'll say that recently a grass that's been kind of neat that's caught my attention is red fescue. And so we have a lot of native grasses which are more, maybe like they're a little bit taller or longer than our traditional lawns. Like a lot of the grasses that we see that you use for lawns, for running around on, for kicking a soccer ball on, which are really great. And you want to be able to have grass that's very, like it grows really fast and it's really kind of like a carpet, right? Like when you really get,
Yeah, this is like St. Augustine, right?
It kind of bounces, if you fall on it, it feels kind of soft. But a lot of those they're annuals. They require a lot of water and fertilizer, and they're not really, they didn't grow to sort of be acclimated to most climates. And most grasses naturally would grow taller than we really need for these kinds of purposes. So, I do love getting to mix in kind of more native sedges and grasses when it's in a border, or, to create a little bit more of a softer kind of feel when you don't have to go running across it.
Mm-hmm.
So red fescue is kind of a cool one because it creates these kind of waves. And so it looks it's a little bit like a Dr. Seuss-y kind of landscape feel. And you can cut fescue too. It's not, totally, it's not like you can't, touch it, or you can't manage it in that sort of way. But I think those are all cool and neat.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a long time.
No, that's
A long
good.
answer for grass. Sorry. I know
We,
there were
we,
more.
we do have more questions though, so and keep them coming to the chat, and of course, Aaron, if you have any questions for the chat, you can ask them, and then we'll read off their answers. Riona Duncan asks, "What is the most interesting thing about your job?"
Ooh. I'd say just the mix of projects is really awesome. I get to work on things which are really like giant green roofs over train stations, which is just, like the things that weren't even really possible to do 10 years ago. Now we can do them with just growth in technology, growth in ability to communicate and to coordinate really complicated projects. But then also, then I get to turn around and work on a historic garden restoration and look at history and how we've gotten to where we are today. And it allows for a lot of creativity, also being able to draw, being able to explore new ideas, new materials, getting to see stuff built is really cool. I'm finally getting to see a lot of that. And it's, there's a lot of cool things, I guess.
Okay. Some folks in the chat are talking about moss lawns. I've never heard of that. So, Lillian said, I prefer clover lawns to grass lawns. Moss lawns are cool too. And somebody else says moss lawns are gorgeous. I've never heard of that. What is that? Do you know about?
So, I mean, by moss lawn, I'm imagining it's green still, and it's a space, it's an open space, but it's got moss growing instead of lawn.
Okay. We've got one of those on top of one of the buildings at my work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll have to. Next time you're here, I'll have to show you that. Gen Z loves moss lawns, they're saying. Okay. Okay, last question
Moss
from the chat.
Cool too.
Was that?
Well, moss gardens are really cool too. Yeah, we've got one project recently up in Maine where there's this forest, and it's all just moss and rock and evergreen trees, and it's really beautiful place.
Awesome. Last question was from Alex Zhu. Says, can you talk about phylums? I don't know what he wants you to say.
About phylums.
Were you just saying that because we normally talk about genus and species, Alex? I don't know.
I mean, I guess, yeah, we don't talk too much about the sort of higher orders so much, just because we're really like working down at the level of the genus and the species, and there's so many different plants that can be related within a single group. Even like there can be so much variation within a single genus and then a family group. Like sometimes we'll talk about families, but in terms of selecting a plant for a place, it's really, it does come down a lot to the genus and the species, because you can have even different cultivars which can live in one place but not another. Like one example, very recently, apples kind of have a cool history of cultivation and being rewilded. And so something that's more recent with apples is that they've gone back to the source, basically, in Kazakhstan, which is the origin of home of the apple. And they've been looking for ways to breed apples, the sort of the original apple, back into some of these cultivar strands to make them more cold hardy. And that's a way in which people are really deliberately trying to look at how down at that cultivar levels, you can have such a variation of where a plant can grow, why do you want to grow it there. So I think a the taxonomists and the botanists will spend a lot more time at those higher levels, but that's less of where I end up being most of the time.
Okay, I've got something to show and tell too before we go into more of your show and tell. This is a Mamillaria Elegans. So elegans is a word a lot of people in the chat will recognize. Mamillaria, I don't know what it means. I don't think it's related to mammalia in any way. It's a succulent that I've had for 5 years now. Goodness. And it started out as much smaller. It's just put out a little ring of flowers just for today. It does this about 3 times a year, and it did it for today for the plant stream. So you can see we've got these little pink crown of flowers up near the top. That's the only place that it does. And this is just a good friend. So, and that's a question for you, Aaron. Oh, also, I meant to ask, do you have any questions for the chat while we're doing show and tell?
What are y'all's favorite plants? Are you guys indoor plant people, outdoor plant people, aspirational plant people?
Good. We'll hear from everybody. They'll start answering that in about 20 seconds. And then what I wanted to ask you, while you're showing us some of your plants, what is a good plant for a starter, a beginner plant person? You know, it's wintertime now, it's cold, I've got to stay inside because of COVID. What kind of plant should I get?
Well, I guess the first big question, and you got to know this about yourself, which might take a little bit of experimentation, but are you an underwaterer or an overwaterer? Would be my first question. And I'll give you all a hint. It's actually, if you haven't been able to pick yet, it's better to be an underwaterer. It's better to forget a couple times to water your plant than to water it too much. That's actually your number one cause of plant death is from loving your plant and giving it too much water. It's what I've heard, at least. That's the verdict from a lot of houseplant experts. But if you are an underwaterer, a great plant to start with is what we call the ZZ plant. This guy, you can water maybe once a month. The trick with him and with a lot of other very low maintenance plants that you don't have to water a lot they'll typically grow pretty slowly. So ideally you kind of want to buy the size that you want, and then it's not really going to grow super fast, and you just it's going to be there and you kind of have it, and that's great. If you're someone who wants to watch something grow, you're going to need to invest a little bit more into the plant and risk some trial and error, which is always, I mean, I've got plenty of error going on around me.
Do you know the Latin name for the ZZ plant?
Ooh, I do. It's got a lot of Z's in it. Might even have more than 2 Z's in it. It is Hold on, I wrote it down actually because I knew I might need to read it. It is Zamocolcas zammifolia.
Okay. I don't know what either of those words means.
Y'all have to tell me.
Yeah.
I do not know. I do know, however, another plant. I know what the words for your Latin or Greek origins are. I apologize because I can't always keep the Latin and the Greek, which ones are which straight. But this guy is what we call Pathos, which is a pretty common plant. You'll probably see them in malls, in hotels, at your local Home Depot. There's a couple of different cultivars of it. This one is Marble Queen, which I like a little bit more than the straight species. It's got some variegation to the leaves, which is when the leaf is not fully green. It's got,
so those
like some
are
other color to it.
that one's a healthy leaf. It looked not healthy. That discolored or off-colored one.
Well, this is how the plant is supposed to look.
Oh, okay.
This particular plant has variegation. It might, like in another plant that's supposed to be straight green, I'd be a little bit worried about that color leaf, but this one, that is natural variegation in the leaf. And a lot of plants are bred, especially house plants, for different kinds of color interest. And so you'll see different kinds of variegation, whether or not it's more of like a mottled type like this, or if it's striped, like snake plants. I don't actually have a variegated snake plant, but that's another really good one for a starter plant that you don't need to water too much. Those come as both, like some of them have a yellow streak along the side, and then others are straight green.
Any other questions for Miss Percival? Feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat while she's getting her snake plant for us.
And I guess I jumped around a little bit, going back to the Pathos. Pathos, which is the common name of the plant, has the Latin name Epiprenum aureum.
How do you spell that second word? Is it with an AU at the beginning?
AU.
Aureum. Yep. Okay.
Aureum. Okay. And aureum means golden.
Yeah.
And epi is upon, and premnon means a trunk. So it is a golden plant upon a trunk. And sure enough, Pathos really likes to climb and wrap around things. So much so that it is an invasive in tropical areas. If you're not in a tropical area, you don't really have to worry so much because the cold will kill these plants, but that can be an issue with a lot of cultivars, just because they've been bred for disease resistance, they've been bred to grow fast, to be tough. These are all qualities that we often look for when we're breeding plants and trying to find what to put in the garden. And so sometimes they can outcompete species. Sometimes that's intentional. Sometimes it's unintentional. Sometimes things like kudzu, which people in the South are probably more familiar with, can get away from us. There's also a lot of sort of forgetting the name right now. I'm the plants person. There's a plant that grows in the water in Louisiana.
Oh, water lilies.
But it's not a water lily, is it?
You're talking about those things with the big bulbs that choke up all the waterways?
Yes. That's an invasive plant.
Yeah.
Water hyacinth.
Water hyacinths, of course. Yes.
Hyacinth, which is also from the Greek legend. So hyacinth. Let's see, what else? There's Daphne. There's a lot of there's a lot of flowers which have origins with Greek gods and goddesses and legends.
Yeah, the Narcissus, right?
Narcissus, yep.
Riona just mentioned that in the chat. Martina says the most successful houseplant I've managed to keep alive since I got it in April is a Dracana. I don't know that one, Martina. Oh, of course you have one.
I've got one too.
Okay.
What do you have?
Let's see. Are the plants that we currently consume susceptible to diseases that could wipe them out entirely, Isabel Sullivan asks, like the Panama disease for bananas decades back?
Yes, that's definitely an issue. There's Whenever you're looking at a monoculture in a in a system, it's going to be more vulnerable because suddenly you have the exact same thing replicated. And so, to get back to my apple obsession for a moment, with apples, they're what you call an extreme heterozygote, which means that the child is nothing like the parents. And that's kind of unusual for plants. You can often, the plant makes more of something very similar to itself, even when it's producing sexually, because plants can reproduce sexually and they can reproduce asexually, which is when you take a stem, a cutting, a root, and sort of a baby plant grows off of a single plant parent.
So apples are they're non-self-pollinating, right? They're all pollinated by like bees and stuff. Is that why the parents end up so different from the children?
It's just it's to do with the genetics of apples in particular.
Okay.
And so when you grow an apple from seed, it will be extremely different, and that's an evolutionary adaptation to that helps support disease resistance, basically, because you have suddenly two parents and a baby apple tree growing all next to each other who are totally different. And so a particular kind of pest or disease who might chew through one plant will have a very difficult time with the next few. Versus in a system, for instance, you might look then at apple trees grown in an orchard. When you have, like, all of those are grown from one plant, which is kind of wild to think about. So like the Red Delicious cultivar, that is, they made cuttings from a single tree that made a Red Delicious apple, and they grafted that, which is when you basically cut a stem and put it onto another plant, and then it grows as the plant that the stem cutting was from.
Grafting is one of the most bizarre things. Oh my goodness.
It's a wild plant thing, yeah. And that's just done over and over and over again. And so you have the exact same individual, even. It's not even just the same species, it's the same individual. And that's when people talk about like cloning for seeds, similar thing. When you have something that is a clone, it's an exact replica. So that when that particular, and often those particular seeds or species are bred for disease resistance and for good health and to have like a good yield of whatever crop you're trying to get. But the vulnerability still remains that, well, if something gets a hold of one, it can very quickly move through a field, an orchard, a forest. So that's one of the challenges. It's why plant botany and plant genetics are really cool and an interesting field. Lots of, like, there's these really cool plant libraries where they like to collect all of these different materials. And part of that is about appreciating the fact that even though we're using only a couple different kinds of plants and specific genetics for those plants to produce a lot of the food we eat, we want to make sure that we have all of these other variations which can occur in case, and you do need to respond to differences in weather, differences in pest situations and all that.
Gotcha.
So that's all really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left, so I have two quick questions for you. Question number one, where can people find out more about landscape architecture if they're interested, or what would you recommend to students who are interested in plants, high school students who know Latin or Greek and are interested in plants?
Well, for the landscape architecture specific interest, I would suggest going to the ASLA website, which is the American Society of Landscape Architects. They have resources for high school, for college. They have a lot to do with career discovery and, well, what might you do if you were interested in this field. And they've done a good job of communicating a lot of that in recent years. As for plant people, I would say make sure that you get outside and you get to look around and see what's around you. If you're really interested in tropicals, awesome, great. Check out your local nursery. A lot of nurseries now grow houseplants, and right now is actually a really good time to go and look. And even at your local Home Depot, because right now all of the nurseries are shutting down for this season, so the plants are the biggest, and they also need to get them out of the greenhouses and into people's homes.
So they're on sale.
So they're on sale and they're big.
Great.
Now is the time to keep keeping your eye out. Do check out for, if you do have a lot of plants, you want to make sure that you quarantine, which all of us should be pretty good at by now. You want to quarantine your new guys, because you want to make sure that in case you are buying from a place where there might be mealybugs, or, just if you might be bringing unwanted additional guests into the house, you don't want them to travel to the rest of your plants as well. Okay. So it's good to, keep an eye on that for a couple days.
Thank you. Okay, last question I have for you. Are you interested in learning Latin one of these years?
I think so, and I think I have a lot of people around me who are very passionate about it. So I'm sure I'll continue to pick up some.
Yeah, and you've got a leg up with all this botanical Latin that you've become familiar with. Okay, well, thank you so much, Aaron Percival, for coming on the show. It's been really nice to see your plant collection a little bit, talk a little bit about plants, learn a little bit about binomial nomenclature, all of these kinds of things. If you ever want to come back on the show, or you ever have more plants, just let me know.
My kumquat, so there's that.
Next time. Okay, well, I'll see you later. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Take care, y'all.
See you later. Bye. Okay, and with that, we're going to move over to our officer reports real quick. Let me pull that up. So today's was just a more chill kind of stream. We wanted to bring on a plant expert to talk about plants during the Thanksgiving week. I hope everybody's having a good Thanksgiving week. My officers were trying to join, and I didn't let them in the Google room because I was talking about plants, and now they're gone. Hang on. Lindy and Nolan, if y'all are in the chat, if you could rejoin that Google Meet, now's the time for it. I know we're a little bit later than we anticipated. Okay, here's Lindy. Hey Lindy, how's it going?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Excuse me. And here's Nolan. Perfect. Okay, so did y'all enjoy the first 45 minutes of the show?
Yeah, that's really cool. Today, actually I made pecan pies, well, pecan pies, I guess, to some people, from like pecan trees in my backyard.
That's awesome.
You can use, so it's really cool, actually.
I love pecans. So, what have you got for us, Lindy?
All right, I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay.
Let's see if this will work. Well, it's not working for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. Alright, I think I got it to work.
Okay.
It says can't share your screen. I'm not sure. Okay. I'll tell you guys about it though. And I'll put the links in the chat later. So in Athens, they were doing some work on some of the sewage and some general upkeep with the city, and they actually found a a bust of Hermes that shows him in old age, supposedly, that is really well kept up, and it's predicted to be around 300 BC. So that's pretty crazy. It's really amazing. They think it might have been made by someone who was a famed sculptor. They think also that it served as a street marker to show where different parts of the city were. But it's really cool, and they didn't even know it was there. They didn't really know it existed, and now they do. So they found it. I'm sure it's going to be preserved really well.
That's amazing.
And, put in a museum or something. I can put the links in here, but the AP has it. The Smithsonian reported it. It was a little bit of a big deal, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, please throw the link in the chat. What's it made out of?
Let's see. I read this, but I don't even know if it says. I think it looks like some sort of stone, obviously. Okay. But it's pretty crazy. I mean, the thing that's so unique about it, like I said, is their quote is like, it shows him in a mature age when usually he's depicted as being very youthful. Yeah, they just found it while doing work, and it was a pretty big deal, I guess, which is really cool, so I can see why.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Nolan, how about you?
Hello. Okay, so let's see if I can share my screen, maybe.
I don't think
I can.
I didn't turn it off. I don't even know how to turn it off on Google Meets. There we go.
Okay, there's that. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about my Slack server that I campaigned on, and within the next few days it will be announced and everyone will be able to join. So I'm just going to talk about that, and then also show my plants because I love plants and I have several succulents.
Excellent. Today's the day for it.
It is. Okay, so a little bit about the Slack. So I'm really excited to announce that this is going up. So anyone who is a current, former, or aspiring secretary, webmaster, or COCO is allowed to join. Once this document is out, you'll be able to join via this link. When you join, create an account by entering your email, and then you can add your pronouns and add your officer position if you want. And then some stuff that I have planned for it is, once this loads, but you can talk to me about what it's being like a national officer, talk with your fellow COCOs and secretaries, get some help on web design, get some updates about the website contest, get some updates about JCLive, and yeah. So I'm really excited about this, and this will be posted within the next few days.
Awesome. So everybody keep an eye out on social media for that. Coming soon. And then Nolan, show us your plants.
Okay, so I have all of them with me. So I have this bad boy. There's 4 of them. They're not doing great. I'm definitely an underwaterer. Somehow I'm managing to not keep a cactus thriving. But it's a little pineapple cactus, and I've got a couple other in here. And then I went to the farmer's market last weekend and got like 5. So
did you know that we were going to be doing this? Because I didn't even know that we were going to be doing this until a couple of days ago.
But I got this little moon cactus that I stabbed my hand with about 3 minutes ago.
Oh.
Got this little guy.
Oh.
I don't know what they're called, but I love them. Got this fellow, and I'm gonna put them in a pot soon. I just haven't bought one yet. Got this guy. He's round, and then this guy is really big. It's about like it's got a little stem that's about 3 feet tall. So this is what it looks like, but it's got a little flower that does not fit in frame. So it's like, I think it's about a 3 foot tall little flower stem, but here he is.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, these are my lovely plants.
Well, I'm sure that you will take very good care of them and that they will grow up big and strong, and then they can take care of you.
I would love that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both very much for coming on. Appreciate it. For everybody in the chat, thanks so much for tuning in. That's been our show. It's been kind of a chill show today. We've got Thanksgiving. I hope everybody has a great week, a good Thanksgiving, gets to spend some time with your family, virtually or in person, whatever's best for you. We'll be back next week again with Flint Hill Schools from Virginia. Their president and a couple of officers are going to come on, and they're going to lead us in some games to play, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their chapter. That's going to be a ton of fun. So we will see you this time next week, as always, on youtube.com/NJCL social media. Be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers, everybody.